This year, the LMA is fortunate to have the leading gubernatorial candidates address our membership. The order in which they will address us was determined backstage. Each candidate will be allowed 20 minutes to address the audience. There will not be a debate or question and answer portion, but you are welcome to interact with the candidates upon adjournment. Candidates, please remember to keep your remarks to 20 minutes. The order of speaking was determined by drawing numbers. First, Governor John Bell Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership at the LMA and for that introduction. And thank all of you all for being here. And it's my pleasure to be with you at the LMA here in the great city of Funroe. And thank you, Mayor Mayo, as the host city mayor. And I want to thank John Gallagher for his leadership as well at the LMA and all of the staff. They do a tremendous job year in and year out and year round. And I'm able to see that from where I am. I also want to thank Congressman Abraham. This is the second time today that he and I have been together for a candidate forum. The first time was this morning before the sheriffs. And anyway, there's a third guy out there, but he's not showing up. But I appreciate the fact that you have. And look, I want to start by asking everybody to just take a moment and think back to where we were 4 years ago as a state. Not pleasant. Don't want you to stay there too long in your mind, but I'm going to just ask you to remember where we were, because we really can't talk about where we are today and how we go forward unless we can remember what was going on 4 years ago. And I will cut right to the point. We're in a much, much better place today. You know, while my predecessor inherited $1 billion surplus, he left me the largest ever deficit in the state's history. It exceeded $2 billion. And we still had disinvested in higher education more than any other state in the nation over the 8 years he was in office. And in those 8 years, $3 billion was swept out of trust funds and put against recurring expenditures, and those dollars evaporated. So the situation that I walked into was tough. The budget was a disaster. The state was in the ditch. But we worked hard. We rolled up our sleeves. We brought Republicans and Democrats and the independents together in Baton Rouge. We've turned that situation around. And that record budget deficit, pretty soon we're going to announce our third consecutive surplus in the great state of Louisiana. I'm happy to tell you that Louisiana now has the largest economy in our history, with current GDP growth number 10 in the nation and number 1 in the southeastern part of the United States. In the 3.5 years I've been governor, we've landed 165 major new economic development projects, bringing in 34,000 new jobs, retaining 31,000 jobs, and $40 billion in capital investment in the state of Louisiana, including the largest economic development project in state history, when DXE Technologies chose Louisiana and New Orleans over Tennessee and Nashville in 2017 for a 2,000 job technology center. We secured that project with a strategic process and incentive package that included $25 million, not to DXE, but to our universities, to our community colleges, so that they would be able to educate and train the employees DXE would need to be successful. And that's what sold them. That's why they came to Louisiana. And you should know that's the best deal in the state's history. It was also the number 2 deal in the country in 2017. We've also won other plaudits that point to another area of strength. Just last year, area development ranked Louisiana among the top 10 states for doing business for the 8th consecutive year, praising not only our workforce development, but also our general favorable regulatory environment, our business incentive programs, and our cooperative state government. The state also won the magazine's 2018 Silver Shovel Award for economic development wins. Additionally, Site Selection magazine placed Louisiana among the top 10 states for the best business climates for the 9th year in a row last year, and ranked at number 2 for infrastructure investment supporting economic development. Thumbtack ranked Louisiana number 4 in the country for supporting small businesses. And LED calculates that from 2008 to 2018, Louisiana has secured more foreign direct investments per capita than any other state in the nation. And in fact, a recent report out of LSU by an economist concluded that Louisiana, and I quote, is in the midst of an industrial boom like none in history. We know that personal income right now across the state of Louisiana is at an all-time high and growing by 4%. And by the way, that's higher than the national average. Louisiana added 4,300 jobs over the 12-month period through May, mostly in education and healthcare services. Our unemployment rate today is at an 11-year low, and no state in the nation over the past 12 months has exceeded or matched our decline in unemployment here in Louisiana. State debt. State debt is declining for the first time in 11 years. So we're investing in our state, finding creative ways to cut through waiting lists and fund transportation projects. This year we passed our single largest infrastructure investment in 30 years, a $700 million package of road, bridge, and port projects. For the first time in state history, we're making use of Garvey bonds from the federal government so that we take our transportation trust fund dollars, 10% of them for 12 years, bond those out so that we can do capacity projects, the expensive ones like widen I-10 in Baton Rouge from the bridge to the split, and add new interchanges on I-10 at Kenner to service the new billion-dollar airport, and right here in North Louisiana in Bossier in order to service Barksdale Air Force Base. My first year in office, I ended the decades-long practice of siphoning money away from the State Transportation Trust Fund to pay for other parts of the state budget. We took the $72 million that had been earmarked by my predecessor to go to state police, and we said, no, we're not going to send that to state police. We left it in the Transportation Trust Fund to deliver transportation projects. And as a result, in that year, even though we had that $2 billion deficit, in that first year, we doubled our investment in the Port Priority Program. And this year, after 4 consecutive budgets, that's an $80 million increase in our investment in ports across the state of Louisiana that would not have happened had we not made that decision 4 years ago. Last year, voters agreed with the approach that we were taking and chose to enshrine it in the Constitution as it relates to protecting the Transportation Trust Fund. Money in that fund under my administration has gone to transportation. And we've, in fact, invested more than $2 billion in Louisiana on more than 1,000 projects benefiting 3,300 miles of roads. And we've worked with our congressional delegation, Republicans and Democrats as well, as the Trump administration to secure funding to begin work on projects that have been in the queue literally for decades. And I know and you know that we have more to do, but we're maximizing the funding that we have. And in fact, we're number 2 in the nation when it comes for the economic impact of our transportation infrastructure investments. In my second term, I will continue to bring together Republicans and Democrats and independents to secure more funding for infrastructure. I will listen to and work with anyone to get it done, and that certainly includes our leaders at the local level, be they at the police jury or our municipalities. Putting Louisiana first and working together is how we got that $700 million infrastructure package this year done, and we will do more of that type of work going forward. In addition to quality transportation infrastructure, key to our success is in our healthcare infrastructure. On my first day in office, I signed an executive order expanding Medicaid, and today more than 455,000 working poor people in Louisiana have health insurance who did not have it before I became governor. I've said it before, expanding Medicaid. Expanding Medicaid is the biggest, easiest decision that I'm going to make as governor. We actually took and cut in half, actually by more than half, the percentage of people who didn't have health insurance in Louisiana. And I know it's counterintuitive, but it's one of the ways we address that $2 billion budget deficit, because we've actually saved $300 million general fund in Louisiana because of the enhanced federal match that we get on the Medicaid expansion. We brought our federal tax dollars back to Louisiana because under my predecessor, we were paying the taxes to Washington, but they were then going to 30 other states so that their working poor could have health care coverage while ours went without. And you should know that a recent LSU study concluded that the economic impact of that decision exceeds $3 billion a year. It's responsible for $100 million in general fund revenue because of that economic impact. And it's also responsible for 19,000 jobs all over the state of Louisiana. So I know that for many years it got blocked in Louisiana for political or philosophical reasons, but we knew that it was the right thing to do. It was never a question for us of whether we could afford to do it. The question was we could not afford to refuse any longer to do it. So thanks to the Medicaid expansion, as I mentioned, we have the lowest rate of uninsured in our state's history. And I know that this next statement is going to be important to a lot of people here. Unlike other southern states across the country, Louisiana has not had a single rural hospital to close, and that's due in large part to the Medicaid expansion. We're also working to expand to every corner of the state broadband internet. By 2017, close to 90% of the classrooms were meeting the FCC's requirements for broadband connectivity in our schools, and since then we've even invested more into broadband infrastructure. And we're participating in the FCC's Connect America program, which is helping to provide high-speed internet services to 54,000 rural Louisiana homes and businesses. And we've also announced the Broadband for Everyone in Louisiana, the Bell Commission, which will facilitate private sector providers, public entities, and other broadband stakeholders, and provide improved availability of broadband service for Louisiana residents by providing universal access for all Louisianans by 2029. And as you all know, all too well, in Louisiana's rural communities, water infrastructure is in dire need of our attention. About 58% of water systems in Louisiana are over 50 years old. As a result, water systems across our state, especially in our rural communities, are in distress. In the past, problems were fixed by putting Band-Aids on them instead of solving the underlying issues. And this leads to more problems down the road and more expensive problems down the road. And once we get that far back in terms of proper maintenance, it is impossible to catch back up. So we know that it's always more cost-effective to maintain a water system than it is to replace it. And most importantly, we don't want to have to wait until there's an emergency to address the problems. And that's why we created the Rural Water Infrastructure Committee that includes representatives from regulatory entities, funding agencies, and key stakeholders. There are representatives from the Louisiana Department of Health and Environmental Quality, the Delta Regional Authority, the Rural Water Association, GOSEP, the Office of Community Development, the Legislative Auditor, and my office. And the goal is simple, is to bring everybody to the table to address the problems properly and in the best way as soon as possible. This legislative session, we took it a step further. And through the passage of a bill, we actually codified that approach and established criteria that water systems must meet to receive funding. We developed financial incentives for fiscally responsible and compliant water systems, consolidate smaller systems that are struggling with water quality and management issues, to create a mechanism for providing or recommending technical assistance to local governments and nonprofits to improve their infrastructure and bring them into compliance with both state and federal regulatory agencies. Establish and provide educational support to municipal and nonprofit boards in addition to operators. And establish a system for holding non-compliant water systems accountable by requiring a legislative audit along with more management training in combination with multi-agency inspection and enforcement processes. This is an ongoing effort that's going to take some time, but we are already making a lot of progress. And I'm also happy to tell you, and I think you'll be happy to hear this, that this year we have doubled the funding from last year for the Local Governmental Assistance Program, LGAP, and the Community Water Enrichment Fund that you know as CWEF. So each of these programs will have $10 million that we will award to local governments. In just a few months, you're going to have access to these funds to help solve issues with water and more in your communities. These are the things that we can do because we came together and we fixed our budget. We created the stability that we had lacked for so long. And we want to continue to provide localities with the tools that they need to be successful. And that certainly includes giving them the authority to make their own decisions. When I came into the office, I changed the rules around ITEP. I made sure that rather than 100% for 10 years, those exemptions were going to be 80% for 10 years. And I made sure that for the first time ever, they had to create or retain jobs in order to get these ITEPs. And I made sure, importantly, that there would have to be local input as to whether an ITEP was granted. We said that if local revenue was to be exempted, they needed to get local approval. I think that that's important for school boards, for sheriffs, for parish government, and for municipalities. Now, my opponents don't support that decision. They don't want you to have a seat at the table when it comes to granting an ITEP exemption. But the fact of the matter is 100% of the revenue being exempted is property tax that goes to local government. Not a dime of it comes to the state. So I think that's the right thing to do. And by the way, paying 20% of that tax in the first year is very helpful because that manufacturing facility is going to create a demand on government in the first year. And if you let them wait till the 11th year, you've got an entity that is already depreciated for 10 years before they ever start paying. Most importantly, it was more generous than it needed to be. We had studies at LED that preexisted my governorship that said that 100% was more generous than we needed to be to compete. And by the way, the Tax Foundation said that it was an unusually generous exemption. So I believe in the changes that we've made. I happen to believe that localities should be in charge of making these decisions for themselves. That is also why I had my administration draw up a bill that became House Bill 547 by Representative Abramson to clean up legislation dealing with the Remote Sellers Commission. This is the internet sales. And it was drafted by Revenue Secretary Robinson to ensure that local sales tax collectors retain full authority to collect in accordance with local ordinances or agreements. And local collectors are going to continue to administer the collection of these sales taxes. We're not going to do that at the state through a centralized sales tax collection system. And you need to know that we're going to make sure that you continue to retain your authority at the local level. I also think state government needs to do more to help localities, especially when it comes to education. That's why I'm excited to tell you that our budget for the current year will invest $20 million more in state-funded early childhood education. We are just getting started, by the way, with early childhood education. We're increasing state funding for our local school districts by $39 million, 70% of which has to be spent in the local schools and in the classrooms. And this year, finally, for the first time in 10 years, we're giving teachers and support workers a pay raise. This is the right thing to do. It's an investment in our children. We're going to make sure that we leave Louisiana better for our children and our grandchildren. But none of it could have been possible if we hadn't come together last year, Republicans and Democrats and independents, and solved our problems once and for all, put the deficit, put the fiscal cliff in our rearview mirror, to do the hard work that's necessary, understanding that in Louisiana, unlike Congress, you have to balance your budget every single year. You don't have the choice to balloon the deficit and say, we're just going to get around to balancing our budget some other time. And we came together with the bipartisan votes in order to take a balanced approach between revenue and savings and cuts. And I'm excited about the results. You've heard about them. We're making strategic investments again for the first time in a decade in Louisiana. And we are out of the ditch. We are firmly on the road to a brighter future. And by the way, I am more optimistic than I have ever been in the future of our state. And I know that you are too. We all know that we're doing better. But you know, elections have consequences. We can either stay on this better road or we can go back to where we were. We can go right back in the ditch. I know what the people of Louisiana want. I know how much better off we are. So the choice is very clear. We cannot go back to the failed policies of Bobby Jindal. They just didn't work. We know that. So we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep moving forward. And I want to thank all of you again for allowing me to spend some time with you today. I want to make sure everyone at the LMA knows Toy Taylor, my Deputy Chief of Staff, who is my liaison to you and to your municipalities. You've seen me regularly at your gatherings, and we're going to keep working together in partnership throughout my second term and grow that relationship even stronger. And I thank you for your service, and I humbly request your support, your vote in this election, and that you join your prayers to mine for our state and for our country, that we will continue to move forward together. God bless you, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Great job. Let's welcome Congressman Ralph Abraham.
Good afternoon. Mayor Lewis is actually my mayor of Rayville, Louisiana, and done a phenomenal job. After you saw him slam this gavel, you now know why his nickname is K.O. Lewis. He was a phenomenal athlete and a pretty fair boxer, that I'm told. Diane and I have lived our entire life in rural America, the Delta. We know that it is one of the poorest regions in the nation. The people are good, they're solid, they want those jobs, but they're not here. The governor espoused some pretty remarkable statistics, but the ones that I see were from the U.S. News and World Report. It came out about 3-4 weeks ago, and it looked at 70 metrics, and it looked at education, it looked at health care, it looked at fiscal responsibility, it looked at job opportunity. The things that you and I and the people, when we sit around after church on the Sunday table, that we talk about. And for three consecutive years, we've been 50th out of 50th. So I understand, being from that rural little town of Alto, Louisiana, the struggles that you as mayors, constables, police chiefs, councilmen struggle with on a daily basis. We task you, we literally mandate you to protect us, to house us, to make sure our water is clean, to make sure the food that we eat is safe. It's a big responsibility. Our responsibility should be to make sure you have the resources and the revenues to do that. This is a phenomenal state. So much promise. Unique culture. More oil and gas than Texas. Natural resources just overflowing with milk and honey, literally. But yet, we can't harness that, and we still end up at the bottom of the barrel. That's not acceptable. That's just, we can do much better than that. As a body, the LMA is literally the glue that holds our state together, because we see what happened in the St. Joe's of Louisiana when a water system completely fails. All of us surround it, we protect, and we go to that rescue. And that embodies a level of trust between government and you guys that have to do these deeds every day of the year. So it's important that when we have any discussion, and we'll talk a little bit about ITEP that the governor mentioned, sales taxes, but regardless of the subject, you have to be at the table. And you don't have to have one seat, you better have many. Because the old adage is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we don't want you on the menu, we want you at the table. So every day you get up and you have to worry, Well, do we have enough money to make payroll? Do we have enough money to pay energy for our electrical grid? Those types of issues, as leaders of our community, face you every day. We want you to be there. We don't want you to have to worry about the checkbook over and over and over. So, as your next governor, we're going to make it more local. Baton Rouge certainly has a role in supporting you, having your back, but it also has a role to unleash you and not tie your hands, allow you on a local level to do what you know for your people is the best. You know your people, you know where they live, you know their dog, and you know what car they drive. You also know better than Baton Rouge how to spend your money, where to spend your money, and what to spend your money on. And as your next governor, my job will be to help you in any way you ask us to do, but at the same time, not hinder you and not make you report to Baton Rouge. I can only imagine having to go down to Baton Rouge every year with hat in hand for the capital outlay and wonder whether you're going to get it or not. Most of you, I know most of the, if not all the representatives and the senators in our wonderful legislature, and you're represented well. But even if they get a project done, it may take 2 or 3 years to implement that, to appropriate the funding and get money for what needs to be happening yesterday. You know, everybody here knows that if we let you run your communities like you know it needs to be run, then you become like the light infantry. You're mobile, you move, you adapt, and you fix the problem. There's no reason to blame past administrations. We just need to fix these problems. I'm not a blamer, I'm a fixer. And this is what we're going to do. We've got to allow you as local leaders in your community to lead and lead and lead. The governor mentioned the broadband and the 5G, the internet. We all know without it, we are dead in the water. And that doesn't matter whether it's business, that doesn't matter whether it's personal, we've got to have it. The FCC just made available $1.5 billion of money for rural broadband, but we're not tapping into that. We've got to address that, we've got to get it, and we've got to get it where you can use it, but as important as that, we've got to incentivize with tax incentives these companies to come in, invest, so that we do have a speed of internet that is competitive and you don't have to wait for the squirrels to run around the wheel while your system speeds up. And again, going back to the local level, you must be able to maintain that right of way, because if you don't, if government gets involved, federally or on the state, then you lose your relevance and they make decisions for your community that you should be making. So that is critical. It's got to be on the front burner, but we've got to access that money on the federal level and pull it back to the state. It's not happening right now. Sales tax, we know that we in this room live and breathe on sales taxes, property taxes, those types of revenues. But look at all the exemptions that we have, over 200, and it's costing you $2 billion total in revenue spread throughout the state. So the exemptions have got to stop, and future exemptions have to be stopped. That actually will let us lower sales tax because, as you know, we have the second highest sales tax in the nation. We need it lower, but you've got to have your revenue. And if we close those exemptions, businesses love it because right now they're having to hire a team of tax attorneys and a team of CPAs just to know what maybe they owe at the end of the quarter. So we do that on a legislative fix. For you, it means more revenue, and for the business, it means less tax, and we all are for less taxes. We've got this Wayfair suit out there now on internet sales, and the Supreme Court ruled that a state must have a centralized, streamlined, efficient, single system in place to collect that tax. But we don't have that. What we do have is a lot of Band-Aids pushed all over our bodies, and what's happening, we now are having an 8.45% sales tax added to all internet sales. The problem with that is that Baton Rouge gets 5%. You get the crumbs, 3.5%. It's unfair, it's unbalanced, because many of you, if not most of you, have a sales tax system that's over 3.5%. If it's 5 or 6%, you're losing money. It's your money. It was sold in your area. You should get the money. So that is something that has to be looked at very quickly, and it has to be fixed. The governor mentioned ITEP. We have got jobs that are leaving our state in droves. In the last 3 years, 70,000 Louisiana residents have gone. They may have gone to Texas, most of them do. Some go to Mobile, some go to Knoxville, some go to Florida. They're gone. I want them back. We've got to get our Louisiana residents back. And ITEP, believe it or not, is a big part of that. You have to incentivize these businesses, because look what happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, when ITEP was pulled out from under the feet of Exxon. Exxon's not going to leave the state. They have too much infrastructure, but they're not going to spend any new dollars. They were going to invest $19 billion, that's with a B, in Louisiana. But as soon as ITEP got pulled out from under them, they took that $19 billion, they went to Texas. Now, I understand for everybody in this room, those tax incentives, those provisions, that money, it is critical. You've got to have the revenue, you've got to have the resources. And that goes back to getting the jobs. We do want you to get your fair share of any tax. You should be able to collect it, you should be able to use it, and you shouldn't have to send any of it to Baton Rouge, to a general fund where you have no control over it. These are your people, these are your businesses, and this is your money. And the sooner we allow you to use it effectively and efficiently, proactively, actually prevent things before they happen, what a novel idea. So this is business. Louisiana is prime for being where we should be number one, number two, maybe number three, but we should never be number 50. And until we lower these taxes, whether it's corporate, whether it's franchise tax, whether it's severance tax, you name it, car insurance out the wazoo. Even Diane and I, who are blessed to have a little disposable income, when we rip that 6-month premium open on that envelope on our car insurance, we're scared to look at it. And it's not that Louisiana wants to have the most uninsured motorists in the nation. They simply can't afford car insurance. That's wrong. And that needs to come down, and it will come down. Why? Because we've got a legal climate that promotes lawsuits and promotes these types of frivolous issues to go forward. If you're a Louisianan, which everyone in here I assume is, and I hope is, you're 4 times more likely to be sued than in any other state in the nation. It's like the ESPN guy. Come on, man. No, we are better than this. So, as your next governor, we are going to lower these taxes. We are going to work and change this legal climate. We are going to fix our $14 billion backlog of infrastructure, where a pothole will eat your car on any road you go on most places. But of the most important thing we're going to do, of everything that I just mentioned, the most important will be give local decision-making, local money, and local power back to you that know what to do with it and know how to use it the best. That's where we are. That's where we're going. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and we'll make this state great again. Thank you. Louisiana has wonderful and so much potential, but we're not using it. We are 50th out of 50th for 3 consecutive years in fiscal responsibility, education, healthcare, you name it, we're last. We're better than that. We're going to move this state in a new direction. We're going to lower taxes. We're going to take care of this infrastructure problem, and we're going to clean up this legal climate, and we're going to get these businesses to invest back in Louisiana instead of leaving Louisiana.
The state of Louisiana is just doing so much better than 4 years ago because we came together and did the hard work necessary to overcome the disaster that was left at the doorstep as I crossed the threshold into office. The largest budget deficit in the history of the state exceeded $2 billion, an economy that was deep in the ditch. Today we're just doing better because we have come together, Republicans and Democrats, and we've worked together to resolve these problems and put ourselves firmly on a road to a better path. Where we have the largest economy in the history of our state, and it is growing at number 10 in the country. And in fact, we have the most personal income in the history of our state. It is growing faster than the national average, historic low unemployment, and no state in the nation has exceeded our decline in unemployment over the past 12 months. So we're just doing much better, and that's the message for the people. We need to stay on the road that we are on and not go back to where we were and pursue those policies that failed us so badly. That's what my opponents offer, more of the same of what the Jindal administration did. But I don't believe the people of Louisiana are buying that because they know how much better we are today.
What separates you from the other candidates in this race?
I've had about every job that I've spoke about, from holding signs to working on road crews, farming, you name it. I understand what this audience is going through right now, trying to make ends meet. So I live in the Delta, I work in the Delta, and I raise my family in the Delta. I know the issues.
How do you see a separation between yourself and the other candidates? What makes you stand out?
Well, because I've been doing the job for the last 3.5 years under very difficult circumstances, but leading this state, leading the legislature in a way that allows us to come together, in contrast to what you see in Washington, by the way, where nothing gets done. All they do is add to deficits and debt. They get to the hard decisions always later. But we've been doing the hard work in Louisiana, and that's the difference. So we're making strategic investments again for the first time in a decade, whether it's pay raises for our teachers and support workers, higher education's getting its first new investment in a decade, more funding for early childhood education. You name it, we're just better off. The lowest percentage of uninsured with respect to health care in our state's history today because of the Medicaid expansion, which is also one of the key ways we were able to address that $2 billion deficit, the largest in our history, because we've saved over $300 million by bringing our federal tax dollars back to Louisiana so that our working poor would have health insurance coverage and not 30 other states with our tax dollars, which is what was happening before I became governor. So the people of Louisiana know that we're better. That is the message. But elections have consequences. And if you want to go back to where we were 4 years ago, vote for one of my opponents because they were the biggest cheerleaders Bobby Jindal had.